Okay, so let's move on to part two of building out this mockup. So we focused on the padding and we applied some text styling to the editable region one div. And we can see that take effect here with this coding. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to focus on adding some images. So I need to add an image up here in the header, which I should also vertically extend, and the nav menu. So before I do the image, let's increase the height of the header and the nav. Save, bounce back, refresh. There we go. All right. So I know that my header is 100% width by 200 pixels high. And depending on how you want to do this, generally I recommend you have a logo in the top left-hand corner. We read from top to bottom, left to right. So you want to have that logo in the top left-hand corner. It's clickable to the home page. So I need a logo. And I know that the height needs to be at least 200 pixels. So I'm going to open up Photoshop. And I'm going to create the logo. So I have no idea what this website could be about, what type of company it is. So I'm just going to pull a graphic that I think would be useful. So let's stand by. Okay, so I have my image here, and it's just an image of an album cover for a Spotify playlist. And I need to place this into my website. So I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to set the width at, let's say, 200 pixels by 200 pixels at 72 DPI. So since you're working on screens, your 72 DPI resolution is the preferred resolution for your images, as well as color mode. Now, RGB, excuse me. But you can increase the resolution on your images if you feel the need to. So one reason for doing that is if you have an image that takes up a lot of space. So this header graphic, we could have it take up, the entire space, but that is an inefficient use of space and time. So I'm going to make this graphic 200 by 200 at 72 RGB, and I'm going to copy this, paste it, and then scale this down to fit the dimensions. All right. Let's bump it up a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to save this as a JPG. Now, for websites, you can save as JPEG, PNG, or WebP. Each have different benefits. A JPEG, of course, is the standard universal format for an image, but JPEGs cannot sustain transparency, whereas PNGs can. And then WebP compresses the file size down of an image, which, you want to make sure that your images are at a manageable file size. So this one's pretty small. It's 100%, 200 pixels by 200 pixels. Maximum image quality here is probably not going to be terrible. If you want to check the file size of your images, you can go to Save for Web and Devices. And you can actually see that this, as a ping, would be roughly 20.15K in file size. And it would take less than or equal to 1 second to download on a 2 megabyte per second internet connection. So as a JPEG, it's 47.57K. The goal of one of the goals of good web design is to make sure that your users have an optimal user experience. And that means that your images can be compressed and downloaded quickly. So that way they don't have to wait for your site to download. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my code and I'm going to go to the HTML. And inside of the HTML, I'm going to create what's called an image source tag. So open caret img src equals quotes. I'm going to choose browse. And you'll notice that my album.jpg is already there. But I want to retype this because I want you to see what Dreamweaver is doing. And you'll see that, oh, look, album JPG is already there. How does Dreamweaver know that? And it's because my index file, my CSS file, and my JPEG file are all in the same place. So I'm going to choose that and then close caret, and it's going to finish that code for me. Let's save it, bounce back to the browser, hit refresh, and there's my logo. Okay, great, looks good. Now I want to change the background color of my header so that way, you know, it makes some kind of sense relative to what I'm designing. Okay, so there is my header. There's my logo. Let's say 200 by 200 pixels is really not the size that I want. Okay, so maybe that image is just, it's too big for the space. So I want to scale that down. I can go back into Photoshop and scale it down. And I already know what the pixels are. So I can do that in Photoshop, or I can do this in Dreamweaver by using the properties bar down here at the bottom and making sure that I have my image selected. And then I can just set the dimensions. So make sure that your width and your height is the same because this is a complete square graphic. Let's save that. Go back to the browser. And there we go. So now my image is a bit smaller. I can probably truncate the vertical size of the header. So let's go over to the CSS, bring that down a little bit, save it, bounce back, refresh. Looks good. Okay. So a few things to note here. I'm changing the height and the width of the header in the CSS file, but I'm not changing the width and the height of the image in the CSS file. That occurs in the HTML file. Okay. Now, I applied an image into this header div, and thusly I need to control the width and the height there. But you can place a div, a background image in a div and then control the dimensions of it within the CSS. So here's an example of that. So I'm going to choose nav. Actually, slider. I'm going to choose slider. That's a better one. And I'm going to take out, I'll keep the background color, but I'll add a background image. Let's see if it works. It didn't because I did the code wrong. So, you know, there's a lot of code to remember. And if you're having trouble remembering some of the codes, definitely go back to the CSS designer. Okay. So I'm going to choose the background properties. And then I'm going to look for the background image setting. Wherever it went. Background image. And I'm going to click that, choose album. Okay. So again, I wasn't terribly off, but I know that it works now because Dreamweaver recognizes the image. We're good there. Save the style sheet. Let's refresh. And for whatever, there we go. Just wasn't refreshing. Okay. So one thing to note, I can click and drag this image, like I can save it, but on a background image of a div, I cannot do that. Okay. So that is something that you may have to get used to if you're coding in HTML and CSS. So let's move on. And I want to look at the navigation menu. So the nav menu needs to have like home, about, portfolio, links, whatever. It needs a navigation menu. It needs pages to go to. And I can see my links there, but they aren't really optimized. They look, you can't even read them. So we need to enable these links. Now, the way that it's set up now is not ideal for a variety of reasons. The links as they're designed now, they don't go anywhere. You can't read them, and they need their own unique styling. They need to be present. But also, I need them to have their own space. So we are going to create what are called children, where the nav is the parent. You can see where that open and closes. The children are subordinate divs or secondary divs that are nested within the parent div. In this case, that would be nav. So I'm going to make a new div, ID equals, and we'll call this home link, close quotes, close carets, type in home, and then I'm just going to copy this code. Paste it a few more times. And then I'm going to delete line 17 because it's redundant. And you'll notice that I'm getting red errors over here. Okay. And so that's because I lost my nav closing tag. And I'm also getting errors because these are duplicate. So I'm going to call this about link, and you'll notice that disappear, portfolio, link, and contact, for example, contact link. All right. So let's save that. And now I need to make divs. I need to make selectors for these rather. So when I do that, it shows up as hashtag nav, hashtag home link, and that designates the parent-child relationship. Now, these hashtags represent compound selectors. Compound selectors can be applied to any HTML element. Eventually, we will get into class selectors. I'm sorry, class selectors can be applied to any HTML element. Compound selectors are specific and can only be applied to one element. All right, so I've created my new buttons here, and they are nested within nav. And so I'm just going to reposition these because I want them to be in a logical sequential order to the design of the site. You want to try to get these to be as like one-to-one as possible. So my navigation is 100%. And I have 4 buttons. So I'm going to put my widths for all of these buttons at 25%. You can do the math there. All right. The height, that will remain the same as the nav. This may be redundant because it will accept the height of the parent div, but I like to put it in anyway. It's not going to hurt anything. And then we're going to use those position relatives. as well. All right, and let's save that. And I want to make sure that this is working. And I know it's working, but I still need to see it visually. So I'm just going to type in color hashtag FFF and apply that to my divs. All right, so let's style, save. Okay, refresh. Okay, great. So I can see the home button, but I can't see the others. And that's because these divs are set up or really need to be parallel in a sequential order in one row. Right now, they are not. So let's fix that. So I'm going to apply float left. To all of these buttons. And there we go. So now we can see each of those buttons. All right, they're all called home. So let's go back into the source code, the HTML, and change that up. About, portfolio, and contact. Save it, refresh, confirm changes, good to go. All right, so this navigation is a bit tall, so let's cut that down a bit. It's just unnecessarily high. So let's set this at 50. And I'm going to copy that number and just paste that into the other links. Save, refresh, good to go. All right, so the design is tightening up a bit. So let's add some padding to the top of these buttons. We'll do 10px. And I'm not going to apply this to all of the buttons just yet, just the first one, just to see what it looks like. Okay, so it's starting to center up. That's good. So I like that. So let's take padding top. Now that's only applying padding to the top. You can use the padding entry here and set it, but when you do that, watch what happens. So padding, colon. You see those 4 entries there? When you apply just padding, it's going to apply it to the top, right, bottom, and left. And remember that pattern, TRBL, top, right, bottom, left, because that is the order in which the code is essentially designed to follow that order. So right now, there's 10px of padding applied to all sides. But fortunately, you can specify that. So that's why we're only using padding top. All right, so that's looking good. Now let's add some hyperlinks. So I'm going to select the word home on line 13, and I'm just going to put in a hashtag. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell Dreamweaver that this is a link. The text has been activated as a link, but there's no actual URL to go to. We can program that later. So we'll save that, hit refresh, and now you'll see that the links are in this fluorescent blue. You can't see them at all. So when that happens, go down to page properties, and you're going to find in the left-hand column a section called links CSS, and you can actually designate colors for your links. So I want a nice orange for the rollover link. We use this yellow for visited, and we'll use a cyan for active. Now watch what happens. I set the colors here. I hit apply, and then hit OK. The CSS has been applied inside of the header of my HTML document. This is not something that I want because my style sheet is linked here. I need all of my style sheet, all of my CSS, excuse me, to be in my style sheet. So I'm going to copy that code and I'm going to delete lines 7 through 9, bounce over to my CSS, drop down to line 79 and paste. All right. And this is going to tell the browser, these are the colors of my links. So let's go back to the browser, hit refresh, and you can see when I roll over the links, they're orange, they're underlined, everything looks good here. Awesome. And then I can keep moving down and fleshing out the rest of the design. And this is just using basic code, basic patterning, and taking your time and following the process. All right. So this is essentially the basics of what you would need to know in Dreamweaver. And the book you're reading, the HTML and CSS book, is going to really offer a lot of great insight on how this is done and how you can build a workflow, a pattern-based workflow to enable quick and efficient speed and production of HTML and CSS websites. But the other thing you need to consider here is that most of the tools that are available to you now, they do all of this work for you. Work smarter, not harder. Why put in a ton of effort to learn how to code if you eventually get a job and they don't even want you to use your coding skills? They want you to use drag and drop building software. And, you know, this is an important dilemma to recognize because there is profound skill and value in learning HTML, CSS, Java, PHP. You can do amazing things with these languages, but these programming languages are not for everybody. This is essentially math. It's a type of math called logic, okay? And logic for artists kind of is incompatible at times. And subsequently, coding can be very, very difficult. The industries, the design industry, the advertising, marketing industries recognize how coding has a steep barrier for entry. And even if you learn it, it doesn't necessarily mean you are a master at it, even if you've been doing it for years. Within the development or programming discipline, I work with a lot of programmers and developers that only know one language or only know two languages. For example, I just hired a developer to do a project for me. And, you know, he writes software, but he's a freelancer and he can do a variety of different things. And I needed him to edit some PHP. And he tells me right up front, he's like, hey, you know, I'm a bit rusty with PHP. I'm mostly writing in these other languages. I'll do what I can. What's nice about this is that the more complex languages he works in makes the languages he doesn't know easier to work with because the process, the logic is relatively the same. You just have to learn the difference in the languages. So there's a lot of crossover skill, translational skill, excuse me, if you learn how to do these things. Now, one of the projects that you'll be doing in this class is a WordPress website where HTML and CSS can come in handy, but aren't necessarily needed for that project. I'm doing a project now where I've been doing a ton of coding, and I will show you that in the next video.